Welcome back to another China Gateway 360 Explainer. Look, if you're looking for direct, fast-paced, and actionable intelligence covering China's economy, supply chains, and business trends, you are in exactly the right spot. Today, we're diving into some sharp, data-driven analysis on a truly monumental shift happening right now in China's procurement market. We're skipping the fluff. This is pure, actionable intelligence for foreign businesses navigating the Chinese landscape. So let's just get right into it.
Okay, here's our executive briefing for today. We'll start by sizing up the prize, unpack the structural legal changes coming down the pipe, address the local enforcement gap, break down the specific sector impacts, and wrap up with an actionable playbook you can use today.
Section 1. The 3.8 trillion RMB prize.
To really grasp why this matters, you just have to look at this number, 3.8 trillion. We're talking about 3.8 trillion RMB. That's roughly 550 billion US dollars in government spending across all levels of China's administration in 2024 alone. This isn't just some niche subsector. This is a foundational pillar of the entire Chinese economy.
And honestly, this perfectly illustrates the tension we're dealing with. Right now, foreign-invested enterprises capture less than 6% of this massive pie. What makes that 6% figure so staggering is that foreign firms actually produce roughly 25% of China's total industrial output and contribute about 10% of its tax revenue. You guys are massive contributors to the economy, yet historically, you've been systematically locked out of public spending.
So how do we end up here? Well, if we trace it back, the bidding law was enacted in 1999, followed by the procurement law in 2002. The thing is, neither of those were written with foreign participation in mind. These 2 decades of closed doors basically built a system heavily stacked in favor of domestic firms, using unpublished scoring criteria and domestic-only catalogs. Sure, in 2020, the foreign investment law promised fair competition, but it was kind of just aspirational. But now, the 2026 draft revisions submitted to the National People's Congress are signaling a massive structural change.
Which brings us to Section 2, 3 structural legal changes. These drafts introduce 3 structural changes that your compliance teams need to be tracking right this second. First up, ownership blind eligibility. The drafts explicitly ban discrimination based on ownership type. This means a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, or WFOE, theoretically gets the exact same standing as a domestic limited company. Second is the anti-corruption architecture. It mandates a 15-year public scoring record to fight bid rigging and requires evaluation criteria to be published before bids even open. And third, they're shifting bid complaints to independent bodies at the provincial level, totally taking the review process away from the procuring agency's own supervisory office.
But here is the absolute game changer, 45. Under the new draft, there's a strict 45-day statutory resolution timeline for supplier complaints. That is down from the previous system's average of 14 months. And as anyone operating there knows, 14 months in the Chinese market might as well be a century. Incredibly, this new timeline includes temporary injunction powers. You can literally suspend a contract's execution while your complaint is pending, which completely removes the incentive for local agencies to just run out the clock on foreign bidders.
Let's move on to Section 3, the local enforcement gap.
We absolutely have to contrast the official text with the reality on the ground. Beijing's legislative text is clear and demands ownership-blind eligibility. Actually, scratch that. It looks perfect on paper, but the local reality risks turning into pure compliance theater. Local governments might just rely on highly subjective criteria, like forcing bidders to prove their contributions to local industrial development as a loophole.
And this is exactly where the battle lines are drawn. 68% of that 3.8 trillion RMB is spent locally at the provincial and municipal levels. Look, Beijing can rewrite national laws all day long, but it can't easily force a transport authority in Chengdu to change how they award contracts overnight. Provincial enforcement is the absolute battleground for this reform.
It's not totally impossible, though. We're already seeing exceptions where foreign firms are breaking through. Take Siemens Healthineers, for example. They recently won a massive 420 million RMB contract directly as a WFOE without even needing a domestic partner. This happened under a provincial pilot program in Suzhou that was testing out ownership-blind procurement before this big national rollout.
But yeah, you guessed it, there's a catch. Out of the 8 foreign firms that won contracts under that Suzhou pilot, 6 of them already had physical manufacturing operations in the province and employed over 200 local workers. The unwritten rule is crystal clear here. Even in an ownership-blind system, your local economic contribution and local employment remain the ultimate tiebreakers. All right, Section 4,
Winners, losers, and sector impact.
So why should your firm care? Because the prize money is heavily concentrated in sectors where foreign firms already have incredibly strong offerings. We're talking about a massive 620 billion RMB walled-off IT sector, 410 billion in professional services, 280 billion in medical devices. This reform targets the exact areas where foreign technical advantages are often the absolute strongest.
Let's map out the timeline for this impact. In the near term, medical device makers and environmental tech firms, you are the clear winners. Procurement agencies have a genuine operational need for the best available solutions right now. Looking longer term, we see enterprise software and IT consulting opening up, though you're definitely going to be fighting some entrenched local vendor relationships. And finally, the uphill battles: infrastructure, defense, and data-heavy cloud services. For sure, those are still going to face steep, legally protected national security hurdles.
Which leads us to Section 5, your actionable strategic playbook.
Let's get practical. Here are your 5 immediate steps. 1. Map your products to provincial procurement catalogs right now. Seriously, stop assuming you're excluded. 2. Assemble your tax, audit, and financial readiness packages so you can post performance security bonds quickly. 3. Submit specific, example-driven feedback through your legal counsel or chamber of commerce during this current 30-day consultation window. 4. Monitor those local rules. And 5. Keep building local partnerships. You might not legally need a domestic partner anymore, but having someone who understands the unwritten rules of a provincial ecosystem, that's a massive strategic advantage.
Jumping back to that 4th point about monitoring rules, you need to pay hyper-specific attention to the detailed implementation rules coming out of Guangdong, Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Shanghai. Why? Because those 4 provinces alone account for 40% of total procurement spending in China. Whatever standard they set, the rest of the country is almost guaranteed to follow.
Let's bring this whole shebang together with one final piece of math: $21 billion. If this legal reform actually works and it moves foreign participation from its current measly 6% to just 10%, it unlocks an additional $21 billion in annual revenue for foreign-invested enterprises. That is a massive injection of capital simply from the door cracking open just a few more inches.
The legal framework is shifting, the door is cracking open, and the rules of engagement in China are fundamentally evolving. So the ultimate question isn't really whether this $21 billion market will open, it's whether your competitors are going to get to it before you do. Thank you for joining me for this China Gateway 360 explainer. Time to update those strategies, and I'll catch you next time.